The champagne flutes clinked, a sound like mocking bells in my ears. I stood frozen near the grand wedding cake, a masterpiece of sugared flowers, clutching my own glass of bubbling nothingness as my father's voice, loud and jovial, carried over the din of my cousin's reception. "Oh, Anna, she's keeping busy figuring things out," he said, clapping a hand on Uncle Robert's shoulder. "Some little online thing, writing blogs or ghost stories for websites I don't know. Pays the rent, I suppose. Not like her brother, the surgeon, mind you. But we can't all handle the pressure, right?" A familiar, hot acid of humiliation burned its way up my throat. Little online thing, ghost stories, figuring things out. The reduction of 5 years of relentless work, of building a career from my bedroom in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, into a dismissive punchline. I forced a smile, the one I'd perfected since childhood, a tight-lipped curve that meant I would not cry here. My mother caught my eye from across the room, offering a sympathetic wince. She meant well, but her silence was its own form of complicity. I was 28, and in the ecosystem of my extended, accomplished Italian-American family, I remained the quirky afterthought, Anna, the dreamer. The little online thing was my independent digital journalism platform, the Clarion Call. I investigated stories the big networks often overlooked: environmental injustices in low-income neighborhoods, corruption in small-town councils, and the human cost of opaque corporate policies. It was gritty, often dangerous work. Last month, I spent 3 weeks undercover documenting hazardous working conditions at a mega warehouse in Ohio. The piece had gotten decent traction, but to my father, unless you were on a screen with a famous logo behind you, you were essentially doodling in the margins of the real world. "Hey, you okay?" My younger sister, Chloe, sidled up, her bridesmaids dress a splash of emerald against the gold ballroom. "Dad's being a dinosaur again." "Ignore him." "I'm trying," I murmured, watching him hold court, no doubt now comparing my life choices to the solid, respectable groom, a hedge fund analyst. "It's just, this suit cost me a fortune." I thought if I looked the part. "You do look the part," Chloe insisted. "You look like a badass CEO." But to him, the part is a byline on the evening news with a 20 million viewer reach. Anything else is a hobby. The evening rolled on with the predictable rhythm of a Long Island wedding, heartfelt toasts, a chaotic bouquet toss, and the electric slide. I danced, I smiled, I deflected questions about my plans. Yes, the website is doing well. Yes, I'm my own boss. No, I'm not looking for a real job at a newspaper. Each exchange felt like applying a fresh coat of polish to a dented reputation. During a slow song, my dad found me. He smelled of Aramis and Pinot Noir. "Having fun, sweetheart?" he asked, his arm around me. "It's a beautiful wedding, Dad." "It is. Makes you think, doesn't it? Stability, family. Your mother and I worry, with this freelance life. It's so unpredictable. Your friend Jessica, she's an anchor in Albany now, right? Maybe she could get your foot in the door somewhere." The condescension was a velvet-trapped brick. "I don't want a foot in a door, Dad. I built my own door." He chuckled, patting my back. "That's my girl, always with the big metaphors." He was distracted then by a business associate, leaving me standing alone on the dance floor, metaphor crumbling around me. Later, as the party began to wind down, a collective exhaustion settled over the remaining guests. We'd migrated to a cozy, wood-paneled lounge area adjacent to the main ballroom. Plush sofas were occupied by uncles with loosened ties, aunts kicking off heels. A massive, silent flat-screen TV dominated one wall, currently showing a screensaver of tropical fish. I was curled in an armchair, listening to my grandmother talk about her rose bushes. Mentally already in my apartment, and halfway through editing my next piece, an explosive follow-up on the warehouse story, focusing on the company's attempts to silence whistleblowers. I had documents and recorded testimonies. It was the biggest story of my career. My father, ever the host even when he wasn't one, decided the room needed some background noise. He grabbed the remote and clicked the TV to a major 24-hour news channel. "Let's see what's happening in the real world," he announced, settling into a central couch with a satisfied sigh. The room murmured with mild conversation. The news anchor was discussing a pending Senate vote. Then a teaser graphic flashed. Exclusive, undercover in Amazon's shadow. The anchor's voice turned grave. Coming up after the break, a shocking investigation into worker safety and alleged corporate retaliation at logistics giant Omnicorp Distribution. A Clarion Call exclusive report has sent shockwaves through the industry and caught the attention of federal regulators. We'll have the full story and an interview with the journalist who risked it all to get it. My heart stopped. Then it hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. No, not now, not here. Omnicorp, my brother Mark, the surgeon, said, looking up from his phone. Wasn't that the place you were poking around last month, Anna? My father waved a dismissive hand. Probably a coincidence. Those places are all the same. Let's see what the real reporters found. The break felt eternal. My palms were slick. Chloe shot me a wide-eyed look. I gave a minute, frantic shake of my head. The commercial break ended. The anchor, a severe-looking woman with intelligent eyes, reappeared. Welcome back. For weeks, rumors have swirled about conditions inside Omnicorp's fulfillment centers, but getting concrete evidence has proven difficult. That is, until an independent journalist using the pseudonym J.L. Locke published a devastating account today, complete with hidden camera footage and internal documents. The report alleges systematic safety violations leading to injuries, illegal overtime practices, and a campaign of intimidation against employees who speak out. The Department of Labor has now announced a formal investigation. We are now joined exclusively by the journalist behind the Clarion Call report. Join us live from our Manhattan studio, Anna Marino. The room didn't just go quiet, it plunged into a vacuum. There I was, on the massive 60-inch screen. Not in my wedding guest suit, but in the crisp blazer I'd worn for the taping 2 days ago, seated in the stark, professional glow of the network studio. My hair was smoother, my makeup sharper. I looked calm, authoritative, and terrifyingly real. Thank you for having me, my on-screen self said, my voice clear and steady, filling the silent lounge. Every head in the room swiveled from the TV to me, still curled in the armchair in my expensive, suddenly irrelevant suit. My father's jaw was unhinged. His eyes were darting between the screen and me, as if trying to solve an impossible equation. On television, I was explaining the methodology. As J.L. Locke, I took a job on the floor. What I saw wasn't just efficiency. It was a calculated disregard for human well-being in the name of profit. These workers aren't drones. They're people with families who were threatened with termination if they reported injuries. Footage I'd shot, shaky and clandestine, played. Overflowing emergency exits, a woman clutching her back in pain, a manager giving a speech about productivity over complaints. The room was still silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer bored, it was rapt. Awe had replaced indifference. My Uncle Frank, a tough-as-nails retired contractor, whistled low. Holy smokes, Anna, you did that. You went in there? On screen, the anchor asked about the risks. Weren't you afraid? My televised image gave a small, determined smile. I was, but the people living this reality are more afraid. They can't speak up without losing everything. My platform, the Clarion Call, exists to amplify those voices when no one else will. My father hadn't moved a muscle. He was staring at the TV, at the version of his daughter who was being taken seriously by a national news anchor, who was discussing federal investigations and corporate accountability. The version he'd just spent the evening belittling as a writer of ghost stories. The interview continued for another 5 minutes. I discussed the documents, the legal implications, and the human impact. I was poised, factual, and passionate. When it ended, the anchor thanked me sincerely. Anna Marino, founder and lead investigator at the Clarion Call, a remarkable piece of journalism, will be following this story closely. The screen cut back to the news desk. The spell in the lounge broke. A tidal wave of sound hit me. Anna, that was incredible. Why didn't you tell us? I've heard of the Clarion Call. My professor cited your piece on the water crisis in Flint. You looked like a pro up there. Honey, you were amazing. That was my mother, tears in her eyes, rushing over to squeeze my hand. My aunts, uncles, cousins, even the few remaining family friends, they all clustered around my chair. They weren't asking about my plans anymore. They were asking about my process, my safety, my next move. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. Through the small crowd, I locked eyes with my father. He had finally stood up, but he looked adrift, isolated on his island of the couch. The confidence he'd exuded all evening had evaporated. He looked small and confused. Slowly, the well-wishers dissipated, heading back to hotels or continuing their conversations in hushed, impressed tones about our Anna. Eventually, it was just my immediate family in the lounge. My mother, Mark, Chloe, my father, and me. The silence returned, but now it was thick and uncomfortable. My father cleared his throat. He walked towards me, his steps slow. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. Anna, he began, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. That was you. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement of a reality he could no longer distort. Yes, Dad. That was me, he nodded, staring at the now-dark TV screen as if it still held my image. J.L. Locke, he muttered. I use a pseudonym for the dangerous work, to protect myself. Right. Of course, he rubbed his forehead. Though the things they were saying, the conditions, you saw that, with your own eyes. I lived it for 3 weeks, I said softly but firmly. I wrote about it. That's my job. He finally looked at me, really looked at me. The proud, blustering patriarch was gone. In his place was a man seeing his daughter truly for the first time in years. I thought, he started, then shook his head. I thought it was just blog posts, opinion stuff. I didn't understand the scale. You never asked, Dad, I said, not with anger but with a weary truth. You just decided what it was. He flinched. My mother put a hand on his arm but remained quiet. I'm sorry, Anna, he said, the words seeming to scrape their way out. They were 2 words I could count on one hand hearing from him in my adult life. I was wrong. What you do, it's important. It's more than important, it's brave. He gestured weakly at the TV. You were on the national news. They were listening to you. The validation I'd craved for a decade suddenly felt less like a trophy and more like a simple fact, finally acknowledged. The chasm between us didn't magically close, but a bridge, fragile and new, had been thrown across it. Thank you, I said. It's not about being on the news, Dad. It's about the work. That's what I've been trying to say. He nodded again, a slow, deep understanding dawning in his eyes. The work, he repeated, as if tasting the concept. You built a door. A faint, genuine smile touched my lips. Yeah, I did. He stepped forward then and pulled me into a hug. It wasn't his usual back-patting, perfunctory embrace. It was tight and held, and full of a dawning, awestruck respect. Over his shoulder, I saw Chloe beaming and giving me 2 thumbs up. The drive home to the city with Chloe was a giddy recap, but my mind was elsewhere. The high of the broadcast, the family's reaction, even my father's apology, they were all external. The real shift was internal. The little girl who had craved her father's approval had finally handed the gavel to the woman who knew her own worth. Back in my Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by the familiar glow of my computer monitors and the organized chaos of my notes, I felt a profound peace. I opened my email to a deluge of new messages, interview requests, tips from potential whistleblowers, congratulatory notes from fellow journalists, and 100 new subscriber notifications for the clarion call. I clicked on one from a former Omni Corp worker. Miss Marino, it began, saw you on TV tonight. Thank you for being our voice. Because of you, maybe my friends can work without fear. That was the real prize, not the spotlight, but the signal it sent. About a week later, a package arrived at my apartment. It was from my father. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a beautiful, heavy-duty professional desk lamp. The note in his familiar scrawl was simple. For all the late nights doing the important work. Love, Dad. P.S. Your mother says don't work too hard. I say follow the story. I plugged in the lamp. It cast a bright, clear, unwavering light across my desk. It was the kind of light you needed to see the truth, to read the fine print, to build something that lasted. I smiled, turned to my keyboard, and began to write the next story. You're tuned to the Clarion Call. This has been a deep dive into the stories they ignore and the people they silence. I'm Anna Marino. Remember, the truth doesn't whisper, it calls. Stay curious. Stay engaged. And until next time, keep listening for the signal in the noise.